Psychological stress, mental health, issues you might have heard about. And I have to thank someone at the beginning of this podcast, and this is going to be a bit challenging, but stay with me. I received an email shortly after last week's podcast where I addressed several issues from a father, senior manager in a large corporation, who asked for help, openly asked for help. He, let's say, let's just put it that way, with certain attitudes and views, he caused, not only in his own organization, but in his own family, mental stress, which led to the fact that one of his children tried to commit suicide. And the child is still there. It's now treated, and the father wrote me a very touching email of how he feels that he has done everything in life wrong. And this is not the only email like that. I received quite a number of emails of people who are deeply worried that due to their behavior, they harm either their organization or their families or their friends, or all of them. And it's time to talk about it. And of course, we know that especially at the moment, due to the media landscape, a couple of aspects are very present. You might have heard that the UEFA didn't allow rainbow colors during the game of Germany against Hungary, and immediately we had the discussion about should this be allowed, shouldn't it be allowed? And some people even claimed that some organizations are just not that forward or that progressive, and it's quite normal that it is not allowed to have these kind of symbols, and no other larger organization would, just because someone wants it, do something. Well, that's just plain wrong. Just looking into the press landscape, we see Nintendo, multi-billion-dollar corporation, is now considering a non-binary Pokemon. Pokemon is one of their leading products they have, after a plea from a young fan. This was reported by Pink News on June 17th of 2021. The main question is, and by the way, if you now say no one ever publicly apologized for being wrong, that's also plain wrong. One of New Zealand's longest serving politicians, Nick Smith, publicly apologized for his vote, his opposition towards the LGBTQIA plus community. It is a bit late, because he did it when he left politics right now, and he's now retired. But you see, people realize that we need to act differently to make it more sustainable, or we will harm human beings in our organization, in our circle of friends, and in our families. And by the way, there are positive examples in sports, because often people say sports has never been a good example. You might have heard of Kal Nassib, NFL Las Vegas Raiders defensive lineman. And not just some random player, $25 million income in a 3-year contract, 5-year NFL playing experience, publicly came out as gay and gets full support from pretty much anyone, except, of course, some lunatics who want to rant around. But you see, there are positive examples, and we will now look into what happened, then look at what is the issue. We also have studies and numbers, which I'm going to tell you about, which are really important for your organization. Then we talk about how to do better. So first, we shouldn't generalize, because we cannot generalize. Often I hear something like all X, and then just a random group is picked, are the problem. I give you an example. Alexander Windman and Eugene Windman were in the media recently. Alexander Windman promoted Eugene Windman to colonel, and you now might think, who are these people, and what does this have to do with what we're talking about? Well, Alexander Windman and Eugene Windman are brothers, and Alexander promoted Eugene Windman to colonel on the grounds of the White House. Eugene Windman was fired by Donald Trump for being a whistleblower in the Ukrainian bribing attempt of Donald Trump, where Donald Trump tried to bribe someone to damage the reputation of Joe Biden. And you see here, the problem is not all the old white, straight, cisgender men, or all the religious old people, or all the old people, or all the religious people, or all the boomer generation people, or all the post-war generation people. This is plain wrong, and it's not helpful to do that. And when you look at it here, Alexander Windman, Eugene Windman, Joe Biden, openly Catholic, you see that we cannot generalize that all of them are the problem, because it is simply not true. However, actions speak louder than words. So you have to show where do you stand and where does your organization stand, because silence is violence and passivity is complicity, and you will be judged when you do not make a statement. Because when you do not make a statement, both sides will assume you're against them, and then you will be torn apart. Having a position is a must, not a maybe. And please, by the way, don't tell me, oh, we have conservative clients and, we can't be forward on these issues. Well, at least that is a clear statement, because you simply said, we put dealing with despots and making money with non-democratic countries over human rights. So when we now look at psychological stress and mental health issues, of course, immediately someone will throw in work-life balance. Yes, that is important. However, it's also important what kind of job changes and choices you do. Professor Jim Donovan from the University of Virginia School of Law, that is a top 10 law school worldwide, and also Jim Donovan is a managing director at Goldman Sachs. He says that you have to make a choice. We can now discuss if you have to or should do, but he says that especially when you work in, for example, merger and acquisition, M&A, long hours are just the rule. It's just the norm. It doesn't make it better, by the way, and that shouldn't be a judgment, but there is strong evidence, and there is a Goldman Sachs evaluation. There was a survey, Goldman Sachs done via The Guardian, published on Statista, a large platform for statistics, where they asked junior Goldman Sachs bankers, how long do you work? And the working hours, end of February of 2021, were 105 hours per week. Since January now it's 98, so a bit less, but let's 100 hours a week, net working hours, 100 hours per week. You create more errors and issues. And by the way, of course, psychologically something happens with you. By the way, during the same survey, they found out that on average, these people went to bed at 3 a.m. and got back up at 8. So 3 to 8 was sleeping time, and the rest is pretty much work. And of course, psychologically, something happens with you. You, of course, think that the world is hovering around you, that you're doing the most important deals. Everyone is your servant, and you are super important and the backbone of the economy. Here are the news. You're not. Because the side effect is, and now we come to the same survey, the rating of mental health before and after starting the job. And it was rated from 0, which is the worst, to 10, which is the best. Mental health before starting the job on average was 8.8, so that's pretty much excellent. And after starting the job is 2.8, which is horrendous. Looking at physical health, it was 9.0 out of 10 before starting the job, which is one of the highest scores you can ever see in any survey. Well, after starting the job, it's now 2.3. 2.3 is deeply worrying that there will be a massive impact on everything you do. But of course, I know what some people now will claim. Some people will say, do we have any data available if mental health issues cost us money? And yes, we do. And there is an OECD-led study, and depending on the country you live in, and by the way, even Scandinavia is not doing too well here, mental health costs in Europe, and now the percentage is the GDP. So in Germany, for example, 4.8% of the GDP is lost due to mental health issues and mental health related issues. In the UK, it's 4%, 4.1 to be precise, 3.2 in Ireland. And by the way, of course, one of the issues is when society doesn't allow people to openly admit their issues. So the higher the pressure is, so all these numbers have to be seen. When you live in a society which is not open, of course, people won't admit that they have mental health issues. But you see, no matter where you are, one of the lowest numbers, for example, is in Italy, where it's 3.3, or Greece with 3.0. But the number hovers between 3 to 5% of the GDP. And now look at your organization. If I would tell your organization, look, 3% of your revenue gone by tomorrow, is that an issue? You would declare myself immediately, well, let's put it in a more polite way. You would ask me if I had get my sanity checked recently, because I should do. There are whole industries that don't have a 5% margin. So if suddenly 5% of your whole business goes down, because GDP, overall gross domestic product, 5% of your business broken down to that, and maybe it's worse in your organization, who knows? But you see, there is a direct connection between mental health state of your organization, your employees, the members that work for you, including the suppliers, etc., and how well your business will do. And of course, we could now ask the question the other way around, because some people ask, are there studies where people were asked how well you are doing, not how bad you're doing? And that's an excellent point, by the way. Thank you very much for these emails. Yes, Gallup did that study, and they did a study in 2019 and 2020. The percentage of adults that say that their mental health is excellent dropped from 43 to 34, so 10% drop from 2019 to 2020. 2021, we don't have the survey so far because the year isn't finished. By the way, male people dropped from 49 to 41, and female from 37 to 27, which means 3/4 of female people do not rate their mental health state as good, excellent, or anything close to it. It's interesting how even political views have an impact on how your mental health state is. People who are more conservative drop from 56 to 41. People who are more liberal, 44 to 32. And people who are slightly more left-wing, for example, Democrats, just to look at the US, or Labour Party in the UK, from 30 to 29, so rather stable. Maybe because they saw that certain conservative people are now either not in the office anymore or on their way out. Married people, by the way, dropped from 49 to 41, and not married people from 37 to 27. Also here, 3/4 of not married people do not consider their mental health good or excellent. I fortunately didn't have mental health issues, and that is of course a very lucky situation, but we will come to that in a minute, because your personal view might make you move towards the wrong decision. And of course, when you now want to know how often are depression or stress or anxiety common, so of course there's a study for that. Statista Global Consumer Survey, they conducted a survey with 8,200 respondents in the age between 18 to 64, so working people. It's representative with that number. And the question was, what is the share of people who experienced mental health problems in the last 12 months? Sweden, 46%, and the US, 42% are leading. And I think in Sweden it's because society is more open to admit it, and in the United States, the issues are just very pressuring. Brazil, 40%, Russia, 38%. Of course, now some people might ask, where's Germany? Because I know that we have lots of German listeners with this podcast. Fifth, 31%, 1/3. India and Mexico with 28, followed by Spain 27, France 26, and China with 22. And in China, I just would assume that not all the people are as honest as they might have been when they answer surveys which are work related. As long as you have social scoring in place where you never know where your data ends up, of course, you most likely will not give honest answers, or you will only do so when there is no other exit you see. So no matter which society, no matter which economic system, and no matter in which democratic or non-democratic situation you are, we see that stress, anxiety, mental health issues, psychological stress, depression are an issue that affect absolutely anyone. And some people might now wonder: is there is there data available about LGBTQIA plus youth? Because that was what the suicide I talked about in the beginning was related to. Yes, there is. 71% of all the people. So there was of course, I have to tell you the setup. The Trevor Project, a well-known project in the US, conducted a survey. More than 35,000 people took part, so it is definitely representative. 71% of LGBTQIA plus youth faced discrimination, and 67% faced situations where people attempted to convince them to change their sexual orientation. I can tell you from my own youth experience, I am part of this 70%. I face discrimination, and I still do. Not a single week passes without receiving hate mails, hate messages, inappropriate comments from different sides. Of course, no one now tries to change my sexual orientation anymore, but when I was younger, many people tried to do so for very, very unacceptable reasons. And just to let you know, and I know that many people, and I know how tough this is, so please stay with me, many people who have children, I just need to tell you this number, but it is a tough one. They asked how many of you had a feeling of absolute hopelessness for at least 2 weeks of the last year of the past year. 2 weeks, by the way, we only have 51 weeks, 52 weeks. So 2 weeks of that is a huge share, and 2 weeks or more can easily end up in a month of feeling absolute hopelessness, and you know where this can end. 71% said that they felt absolutely hopeless for 2 weeks or more in the last year. 71%. And of course, people are more worried because when you see where science is going, science has strong evidence. Still, people now try to erase science. Not only the Republicans in the US, but also others. But the Republicans in the US now try to prevent that critical race theory is taught, which is taught for 40 years about slavery and injustice towards the black community. So they want to erase history on slavery. And by the way, the same people want to keep statues of slave owners in public to celebrate them because they say you can't erase history, the usual bigots. And now you, of course, think, is anyone speaking up? And yes, General Mark Milley, who is the Joint Chief of Staff of the US military. And it is the first time in history we have one of the leading, most conservative people turning against the conservative. And he said, and I quote word by word, "What is wrong with understanding?" He also said that he expects people to be widely read and that this is an advantage, and he will not accept woke as a swear word. Maybe you heard that term, woke agenda, your leftist woke agenda. As soon as people talk about the woke agenda, these are the people you have to worry about, because these people are led by an ideology of denying science and evidence. And by the way, many people, of course, now realize, it didn't go down too well, so let's try to switch sides. I'll just give you some examples. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump now try to distance themselves from Donald Trump. Sorry, that's just a bit too late. When you have a network is one thing. A network is people with experience and expertise, proven expertise, who contribute value. That's a network. But when you just hang out with your cronies, in your nepotistic kind of setup insider deal, this will haunt you. And it will haunt you until the end of all days. And in the UK, we see bad leadership right now. And they see how it haunts them. So Matt Hancock, as the Secretary for Health Secretary, had to step down after he breached social distancing rules. He was caught by CCTV cameras, how he made out with his office assistant. That, of course, went to press because obviously someone from security took the picture and sold it to The Sun. And as we know, The Sun publishes everything that could cause a scandal and sell more papers. So now Boris Johnson, as the Prime Minister, has two issues because Matt Hancock had to step down, of course. And, he said he doesn't want to step down, but then a week later he did. Dominic Cummings and Matt Hancock are now two loose guns out there who both have no positive feelings towards Boris Johnson. When you are listening to this podcast and you know that you are in a setup which is only based on nepotism and cronyism, an insider deal, where you simply say, we just like each other, we come from the same club, university, some random fact which has nothing to do with expertise or value contribution, you better remove yourself from that soon. Because in times of transparency, internet, social media, the question is not when you will fail. No, sorry, the question is not if you fail, the question is only when you will fail. So, by the way, Matt Hancock, in his resignation letter, which he handed to press, already said that he stepped down because, and I quote here, they let the people down. So it's already a slap in the face with Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson now has to deal with it. Of course, people ask, is there any good example of the new work and the new normal we are coming up where people actually handle the new situation for work well? Because last week we had examples of how organizations didn't do well. And yes, there are examples. So for example, Pepsi now says that the new future of work means more remote work options. And the other aspect is they said there will be no assigned desks anymore. And that comes with a price tag. I know that other companies did that as well. For example, Accenture did that. However, there's a huge difference between a professional services consultancy team and people working in that area and people who want to work for a certain organization. When you simply have to work somewhere else every single time you show up, you might lose a feeling of community. You might lose the feeling that your employer is someone who cares about you. And of course, you might lose the feeling of why do I actually work here and not somewhere else? So people lose the contact to the brand, which might be a huge issue. Often when people start this concept of renting our desk, or you have to book your desk or something else. Often this is recommended by consultancy companies, and I know where they're coming from. I love to work anywhere because that's my job. Of course, not during the pandemic, but in a usual year, I travel 200 to 250 days a year. And I love it. That's my job. Here, there, anywhere, and I can work from absolutely anywhere. I live a minimalist lifestyle. Everything I own is in one carry-on suitcase. No exception. And many people would not like to do that, which is why they decided to be employed somewhere. So be sure that when someone does consultancy with you, that they have the right view on the issues, on the ideas of the concepts of your new work. It is not helpful when someone from a professional services company tries to make your company just another version of the consultancy company, because this is not how it works. Be aware of that. So now we will look at where are the problems and how can we do better. So problem number one, and when we talk about mental health issues and psychological pressure, often privileged groups do not see the issues that non-privileged groups have. And by the way, I just give you an example about myself. We now had a global pandemic, and we still have it, although we're hopefully looking at the end of the pandemic. We now see that many people had to face tremendous challenges during the days during the pandemic. Just imagine me sitting there at your boss and say, look, I just had to reorganize a couple of things. It's just a matter of attitude. It's just you have to be in the right mindset, and everything else is just a matter of personal organization. So just get that sorted, have the right mindset, and you will be good. And of course, people would ask, by the way, Niels, are you married? Are you in a partnership? Do you have children? And my answer would be no, and no. I'm single. That was a life choice. So no partner, no children, which makes it way easier for me to get through a pandemic like this, because I'm used to situations which are challenging, which are stressful. Also, I can say that as a referee, former referee, I of course am used to situations and to deal with situations under tremendous stress. You cannot simply say because you have certain privileges, other people just have to get in the right mindset. Mindset, and this is Spencer Cornelius created this brilliant term of mindsetpreneurs. Of course, you can have a certain attitude towards something, but it doesn't change the situation, how the facts are. When there are facts and evidence, a mindset does not change the facts and the evidence. You might get a different point of view, and maybe you should call it point of view, because the term mindset is on the way to become the next motivational, inspirational nonsense chumbawamba that no one in the business world needs. So it is very important that you see your own privileges. And by the way, even when you judge a certain situation, you might have heard of unconscious bias. And you know what the problem is of unconscious bias, besides the fact that it's bias? It is, as the name says, unconscious. If it would be conscious, it would be even worse. There would be active discrimination of people. But unconscious bias means you are blindfolded or blindsided in certain situations because you do not see the issues of the other people. You simply say, I do it that way, and I copy my own attitude on other people. And that is now the blueprint for success. That is the most unscientific approach and the most ignorant approach you can choose. So stop doing that. Also, we see more and more that, and that's really a move backwards in senior management. We see a reappearance of toxic masculinity and sex and gender stereotyping. So people say, oh, you have to be hard and you have to be tough, and only the tough ones are going to make it. I even heard 2 weeks ago that in a workshop which I led, someone said men are stronger and women are more emotional. Really? That is proper 1970s, 1980s stereotyping statement. So you have to move away from that. Business is not about being the toughest one and being the most straightforward person. Because diplomacy and solving situations, maybe you look at Angela Merkel, because I think she did her job reasonably well, not to say, in my opinion, she did it excellent. And was she loud? Was she straightforward? Was she insulting? Was she the strongest one in any senior? No, she was diplomatic. That was part of her success. So be sure that you don't stick to these stereotypes. We're going to look at how to do better in a minute. And many of the solutions I see, that's the third aspect of the problem, many solutions I see are simply either not hitting the goal or the target, or they are just short-term thinking. I just give you an example. One company saw that they had mental health issues amongst their staff, there was psychological pressure, and they needed to do something about that. So they got different proposals and quotes in and then realized, yeah, that costs money. So what they decided to do is, and I'm not making this up, they decided to do an intranet-based mental health webinar. So when you think that your mental health is not great, you now have the right to go on the intranet and look at a 30-minute off-the-shelf, standardized, not tailored to your company, although there's a company logo in there, which is not tailoring, let's face it, that's just branding. And while it's a bad approach to branding as well. So it's a standardized, off-the-shelf mental health webinar of 30 minutes. And that is the approach senior leadership thinks is appropriate. Let's just assume you're the leader of the department, let's say purchasing or sales or marketing or research and development. And by the way, one of these off-the-shelf webinars, which you can buy for like $99 somewhere online, completely random nonsense. Let's just assume you're leading the department I just mentioned. And I approach you and say, look, we need a really new approach to marketing, or a new sales approach, or we need a new product and research and development, or we need to have better purchasing prices, a new system there. Could you develop something, by the way, budget like $100, 100 quid? What do you think? You would simply say that you can't take it seriously, laugh me off and leave for a reason. So there are different things you can do. Of course, you can have training sessions, which are very helpful, or consultancy. You have coaching and mentoring, which is always very helpful. You can have people invited speaking at your events, and for people who have to or should help you for a longer term, you have project and interim management available. And often when people ask me, is there a written approach to what I say here? Yes, there are articles, and the articles are not the same of what I say here. That's also very important. If you want to have something in writing because you want to forward it to some of your friends or colleagues or leaders, just go to expert.nb-networks.com. Just go on the website just go on the website expert.nb-networks.com, put your email address there, and once per week you get articles, podcasts, and more resources like video interviews, all for free, of course. There is 100% content, and that's an ad-free guarantee, as usual. So how can we do better? To do better is, first, you need management commitment. That's step number one. And the management commitment must include the awareness. So when the management has either no commitment and they only say, oh, just do something, nothing will work. And when they have no awareness and they say, oh, we have these people who have like mental stuff. Could you just do something with them because we want to get productivity numbers up? That is not awareness. That is not helpful. Of course, I can, from a certain point of view, although it is really sad to start every reasoning and every argument and every discussion with that point of view, I can understand that the board level wants to know how will it affect the numbers. And yes, there is a massive, as I told you, including the source, there's a massive economical impact. So if you do not act as a board, if you do not get the awareness, if you do not give the full management commitment, you are deliberately harming your own organization. And I don't think you want to do that. So management commitment, awareness, because otherwise there will be a massive economic impact on you. Step number 2, every step you do comes with a price tag. Your own business most likely will go the following. You charge a bit more money. I mean, maybe you're in the discounting area, but even there, profit margins are quite healthy. You have to do big numbers, but you have healthy profits because you publish your numbers every year and you're doing well. So you always know that good services come with good pricing and excellent services come with excellent pricing. So do not get into this process and say, we're going to get quotes in and choose the cheapest one, because that will never work. Also, do not just pick someone who's part of your cronyist nepotistic network, because people immediately realize when you're just hiring one of your mates and buddies from wherever you know them, and they suddenly should solve the situation, and they are probably unable to do so. So you have to choose the best option, and that often comes with a higher price tag. But the price tag is still lower than the midterm and long-term impact, economic impact on your organization. Not even talking about reputation on the market, employer branding, etc., etc. Also, and that is step number 3, you have to see we have something which comes to an end here. You cannot decide based on gut feeling, or maybe you call it experience. At the end of the day, it's most likely just an opinion. You have to base your decision, you have to make your decision based on facts and science to make a proper decision how to act when it comes to psychological stress and mental health issues. So how to do it better? You need management commitment. You need the awareness on board level. Without that, nothing will happen. Nothing will work. No matter how hard you try, people immediately realize when there is a pseudo activity going on board level. And by the way, if you don't act, there will be a massive, at least economical impact on you, if not other impacts as well. And it's your own fault. Step number 2, when you get the quotes and when you look at which countermeasures you want to do, when you look at which steps you want to introduce, don't do it by the cheapest offer. It will never work. It will never get the results you think it will. And by the way, don't pick the people you just know from somewhere. Look if they are properly qualified, because people know and realize when you just want to do someone a favor. And also, this is the end of just deciding by gut feeling, or you call experience. It's an opinion. It's just an opinion in most cases. Look at what the evidence says, because these studies are publicly available and there are strong suggestions that you have to act right now. And one thing I have to mention at the end, oh, by the way, some people might listen to that on different podcast platforms or YouTube. I had to delete a couple of really nasty comments last week, like, oh, the white man. No. Don't do disrespectful comments under my podcast. They will be deleted. We can discuss, and it can become heated and it can become emotional. But we discuss based on facts. That is the only way how to do a discussion. By the way, if you like the podcast, I'm happy about you leaving me 5 stars. Thank you very much for that. But one thing I want to mention at the end. I don't want that your organization, your circle of friends, or your family becomes part of what I had to mention in the beginning. And by the way, mentioning this situation happens with the agreement of that family. I'm not going to mention the name or the organization because I want to protect the family. So the family and the father and the person affected agreed that I'm mentioning this issue here on this podcast. I do not want that your organization faces the same fate. I do not want that your circle of friends will be affected that way. And I especially, and that is the most important aspect, do not want that this happens somewhere in your family, because the toll, not only on the people directly affected, but also on the people indirectly affected by this, is huge. So when you like to discuss something, feel free to send me an email at any time, nb@nb-networks.com. I'm there for you at any time. Also, when you now say, is there anything else you have? Yes, I talked about people. And now we talked with people as well. We have brilliant interviews this week. So yesterday we published an interview with Leocadie Ebakissi, who specializes in entrepreneurial transformation, which is exactly the thing you need right now when it comes to these issues. Of course, I'm happy to help you as well, so feel free to drop me an email as well. In case you speak German, I have an excellent interview with Exil Discount, someone who is a DJ in Berlin, talking about what about politics, party, Berlin, and gender have to do with each other. And he gives you a point of view. It's a German interview, so that's the German channel. He gives you a point of view which most likely the majority of people do not have, but it is important to have that point of view. So please listen to these interviews on the English and the German channel if you can speak German. If you can speak English, and most likely when you listen to this, you will be able to speak English, listen to these interviews because they are tremendously helpful. It is now important that when you have issues, contact me immediately. Don't just postpone it, because these issues will not go away. When you now have something written down and you think we should do it sometime, the time is now. Start with the very first step, no matter how tiny it is. Start with it right now, right here. Preferably during the next working day, or today, if possible, because otherwise you will always postpone it again and again and again. So now I wish you all the best implementing these steps in your organization. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.